on a cobweb afternoon in a room full of emptiness by a freeway. I confess I was lost in the pages of a book from the bed of reading. I will die lay to rest and where we wanna go. The house long to be from my room patiently. I'll wait for you there. Like a stone, I'll wait for you there. And on my deathbed, I will pray to the gods and the angels like a pagan. To anyone who will take me to heaven, to a place I recall. I was there so long ago, but yeah, bruised, who I was glad, and then you let me on. Your house long to be from the road patiently. I'll wait for you there. Like a stone, I'll wait for you there. Till the day was gone, and I sat in regret of all the things I've done for all the blessed and all that I've wrong. In dreams until my death, I will wander on today. Oh, my you. Use the cards as a meditation. Those he plays never suspect. He doesn't play for the money he wins. He doesn't play for respect. He deals the cards to find the answer. Sacred geometry of chance. Hidden law of a probable outcome. The numbers lead a dance. Know that the spades are the swords of a soldier. Know that the clubs are weapons of war. Know that diamonds need money for this art. But that's not the shape of my heart. You may play the jack of diamonds. You may lay the queen of spades. You can see a king in his hand while the memory of it fades. Know that the spades are the swords of a soldier. I know that the clubs are weapons of war. Know that diamonds need money for this art. That's not the shape of my heart. That's not the shape of my heart. If I told her that I loved you, maybe think there's something wrong. That a man with too many faces, the mask I wear is one. For those who speak know nothing, find out through their cause. Like those who curse their love, two faces. For those who feel lost.
Hallo, hallo, hallo. Okay, so welcome to this Disentis Roadmap symposium. It's 2 o'clock, we start. So I will show you, hold on, where's the, can you start it?
Yeah, okay, that's your first.
No, it's my last.
That's all.
Anyway, so we start with the last slide. So we have from 2 to 3:10, we have presentations, and then we have 20 minutes for discussion. And at 6 p.m., we will try to meet in this room here. So for those interested to continue and look at the white paper, please join us here in this room. So I and Laurence, we will guide you through will guide us through this session. And I will start with a small introduction. Okay, so last summer, about 50 people met in Disentis to celebrate the success of the Bouchout Declaration, which we launched in 2014. The Bouchout Declaration was about opening up our knowledge and make it open and accessible. And it was successful for specimen data, which then sort of became a standard. It should be open. So it contributed a lot. And in Disentis Roadmap, so 54 people joined, and we talked about what we achieved, but also the gaps. And so this was the result. So we focused on what we did not achieve. And one big element we have not achieved is access to publications and data in publications. That's an important point. So the result was this Disentis Roadmap, which is that by 2035, the power of biodiversity knowledge from each research publication will be fully leveraged with an open science framework, including unencumbered data discovery, access, and reuse across scientific disciplines and policy applications. So make our data accessible, not just for us, but for everybody. So here are the specific goals that we want to try that 100% of the major biodiversity research funders and academic publishers will enforce and enable fair data publishing. So it's more than just saying publish open access, but actually make sure the data in publication is also accessible. The second point is that we have to go beyond PDF. So the articles should be machine actionable. That means the machine should understand what's inside and should be able to extract the data. That leads to the third point. So the publication should be fully AI ready. And then we, of course, have to see that a substantial, not a substantial, but a small amount of research funding is going towards building an infrastructure that allows to reuse all this research data we liberate from publications. So in the short term, the next 3 years, we want to develop use cases. So we want to base the Disentis Roadmap on not on a vision, which is out in the blue, but we want to really go and say, here are use cases for which we liberate this data. So this will guide the construction of this work. So we want to, from all the use cases, we want to find out which are the minimal standards we need to actually create open, accessible knowledge. Because one is to create the knowledge, but also you can always go into depth. But a lot of the groups are much more able to do this much more and curate the data much better than instead of doing it for everybody. And then we want to have metrics to evaluate progress towards that. But we also want to use that and try to figure out where we can find different metrics for science. So in the next 5 years, we want to create communities of practice. We want to build efficient workflows. So we have now some workflows that we want to develop global training programs. And we want to engage the academic publishing in changing the way they publish. And then we want to make sure the link between this course and other institutions and the literature is secured. So these are the approach we've chosen. So define use cases, analyze the use cases to define specifications, what we call to build this Libroscope. That's a vision of a tool that we actually could go into the literature, find literature, open the literature and make the data accessible. Then publish a white paper. So we actually talk about, we can really define what we talk about here and we can communicate. Then build an existing steering group, which is based on people from the Disentis workshop. And then we have to, of course, look into developing a lightweight governing board and organization to actually make all this happen. And all that starts from the Disentis Roadmap. And so people who are interested to contribute can contribute or are welcome. The white paper essentially is a consensus piece. So if you are interested in contributing, please contribute. We probably go publish this in PLOS Biology, not in Biolog, but by Biology. There's a draft available for those interested. So far there are 8 use cases, but we are looking for more. The submission target is by the end of this year. And if you want to contribute, please contact me or Tim Hirsch. So in a nutshell, what we envision is that we want to go beyond PDF. We want to make all our data accessible. Then we want to make not just the data accessible, but disseminate that to our users, so like to GBIF or IPBES or whoever. And that's a starting point. So we have already like treatment bank, which is based on a factory who produces data from publication, which includes 128,000 articles, so 1 more million treatments, about 780,000 figures, over 100,000 tables, more than 2 million material citations cited, and over like 5 million bibliographic references, which are all taken out of these publications. And so you see also that this has been disseminated to the biodiversity literature repository, which is the place to make FAIR and which will store all the extracted data. Then it's in Biodiversity PMC. That's a collaboration between a clone of PMC in Europe, which allows to insert biodiversity literature now. And for example, checklist bank, so we can create data and immediately import this into checklist bank. So the checklist bank and catalog of life can be updated at a very short note. With that, I would like to thank you for your attention. So I think we continue. If you have any questions, put them in a piece of paper, and then we'll just have a longer discussion at the end. Thank you. And now Laurence will talk about the future, about how we should publish machine actionable. Thank you.
Thank you. So it will serve you later on, you're just after me, so. Thank you. Anyway, so I'm going to present you what we envision biodiversity literature to be and how we should all publish, hopefully. So the next is, I need help. Okay. So scientific publishing is part of the research cycle. So what is at stake for us is to go beyond open access and to reach fairness. The tricky part is probably the I, standing for interoperability. So everything begins with the collect of a specimen on the field that is then brought back to a museum or botanical garden. Then it's compared to what is already known, and then it's described or revised, and then it's published so it can be made valid again. The time it takes for me to understand this thing, the time it takes to publish from the moment of the collection of the specimen to be collected and the moment of its publication has been estimated roughly on average to be 21 years. So it means that on average, from the moment you collect a specimen and the moment we publish something on it, it takes 21 years. So the challenge for us is to decrease that time and try to speed up a bit and make sure that the literature is accessible thanks to more accurate and massive access to the published data. So that's what we are trying to do. And this is the Disentis vision of what data fairization should be. So the idea is to split every component within the paper and to push that into a galaxy of databases useful for our field. So, and to go from a bibliographic citation network to a citation network of fact, and to have bidirectional link so we can find anything from anywhere and go back to the source. So how do we proceed? We semantize the text. So to semantize means to give context of the information, to contextualize the information within the paper. So it's usually commonly done with the first page of an article with the metadata. But we cannot stop here, since most of the information useful for our field is behind here. No, there again. So it's in the taxonomic treatment. This is where most of the information are important for our field. So it's here that we are going to annotate each piece of information, the taxonomic treatment, basically everything concerning a taxon described or revised in a paper with all the components. So it could be the synonymy, the identifier, the bibliographic reference, and particularly the examined material, which is something very important, and we go deeper. So we annotate every piece of information into the material citation. Then each entity is identified by a persistent identifier, for which we agreed on during the bicycle project led by Pensoft. So we agreed on which identifier we should use in our publication to be consistent one to another. So here you have the article we wrote that lists all the identifier we think should be better to use. So both Pensoft and European Journal of Taxonomy have built a new chain of production for XMLization. So both workflows are a bit different in the way they run, but the result is quite the same. So if you want to hear more about the workflow of Alpha, Lubo is there, so you can speak to him. If you want to learn more about EGT workflow, I'm here to answer any question. But basically, the idea is that the result is quite the same. And at the end of it, and that's what is important, we are producing XML-based publication, like they are the foundation for more reliable artificial intelligence models. So then once we do annotate all that and it's then XMLized, the file is been sent to Platzi, thanks to a partnership with Platzi, that is going to process all the annotation within treatment bank and then push that into all the galaxy of databases that are relevant for our field. So here you can find some color code. So in green, you will see all the databases, biodiversity related databases. In blue are the genomics one. In pink are the citizen science one. And even the general public has other databases that could be interested in the data pushed there. So once we do all that, we want it to be visible for the journal. So we asked GBIF if we can have hosted portal so we can display our data and make it more visible. So within GBIF, all the data coming from the journal are then displayed in its own hosted portal, so we can see it from different views. So very quickly here, you have 3 different views to showcase in a journal. So the first one is the geo-referenced occurrences of the journal. And then the second one is a clusters. So the clusters is basically all the occurrences from the journal linked to other occurrences in GBIF. And the third one that I put here is the data set. The data set in that case is an article. And from here, we also have the link to other citation. So other articles citing this article. And this goes very quickly because the paper is published day 1, then it's processed by Platzi day 1, and then it goes into GBIF day 1. So it's or day 2. But it goes very quickly. Another database that I would like to mention is Ocellus. So Ocellus is a front end of biodiversity literature repository and treatment bank in which you can find the image coming from the article. So here you can query for family, a species or genus, and you will have all the image coming from treatment bank or Zenodo. You can, of course, zoom it, you can download them, you can do whatever you want with those images. Another database that I would like to introduce is Biodiversity PubMed Central. So Biodiversity PubMed Central gathers all the publication from PubMed Central with the additional article from Pensoft publisher, AGT, and also a million taxonomic treatment from Platzi. So here you can ask a direct question to the biodiversity PubMed Central, such as what is the taxonomy history of that species, for instance, and you will have direct answers. And of course, you can have a link to the direct source and the original source. So basically, the idea is to have a circulation of data very quickly. Then we can have some dashboards showing the journal and the benefit from the journal that we can measure some things. So we do have several dashboards provided by Platzi or by GB Phosphate portal in which we can measure the distribution of the occurrences from continent or could be lots of things. My favorite being the age of a bibliographic reference. So on average, a bibliographic reference in a taxonomic paper is 50 years old. So bye-bye impact factor. So to conclude, the benefits are multiple for a publisher, but also for the community, because with that kind of circulation of data, we can optimize and accelerate the dissemination, which is the first mission of a publisher, of course, but we can also enable our community to find new indicators and new metrics that would be more useful for us. Thank you very much. And I'll call the next speaker, Davnah. Please enjoy that.
I think it's good. Thanks. So while the slides are coming up, they're up. I'm Davnah Urbach. I'm the Executive Director of the Global Mountain Biodiversity Assessment, which is a global network of mountain biodiversity nerds, let's say. And what I will be presenting is work we've done in collaboration with Juliana Villa, who is an intern with us, who was unfortunately in the past already an intern with us this summer from George Mason. And I will only talk briefly before handing the microphone over to Juliana, sorry. So, evidence mapping in support of a global assessment of mountain biodiversity. We have heard about it quite a bit during this conference already. There's an exponential growth in biodiversity publications. Here, an example for mountain biodiversity with an increase in publications about individual species in soil, in a soil environment on the right-hand side. Sorry. Okay. And on the left-hand side, examples of increasing numbers of publications in the Hindu-Kush Himalaya context. Now, the scientific publications are used to produce assessments, and there are a number of assessments produced about biodiversity, not the least through IPBES, but also through other consortia. But there's a gap about mountains, and this is a gap we are trying to fill with a global mountain biodiversity assessment. And not only there is a gap with the absence of such an assessment, but there is an issue in that the literature that is used for those assessments is primarily English literature, which is an issue because there is a lot of information out there in other languages, including in Spanish, which Juliana will be talking about, and in Chinese. So what we have decided to do is to fill the gap with an assessment of mountain biodiversity, but also do it in more than English. Juliana.
All right, thank you. So the assessment is two parts. We have the first part that is a citation database-based construction and also an annotated database. So for the first part, the citation, we are building a corpus in English, Spanish, and Chinese using a search of terms that we use as a query. And then we apply that to the Web of Science, and then we capture all those papers from in Spanish, English, and Chinese using Cielo, which is for Spanish, and also CA's data for Chinese. And that's how we build the corpus. For the search terms, well, the first group of terms that are very important is the mountain ranges. This is already standardized, published, open access. You can use it, apply for ArcGIS, and that's a layer, includes all the mountain names. And then the second group of names or search terms is the taxonomic group of interest. So for example, for birds, we have a generic group of words that are about ornithology, avifauna, etc. But we also include scientific names of all the bird species that are in the mountains. And then we also conduct a data scraping process just to identify words that can have multiple meanings, and we remove those. And after that, we just go to Web of Science and apply the method. And we know that Web of Science is not great. It can provide excellent flexibility in the amount of terms that we can include. However, it's not open access. And then we also have some issues with, for example, the database we use in China because it's not accessible outside China. A way to fix that is using OpenAlex. It's open access, it's great, we can include multiple languages. However, it gathers a lot of papers, so it requires more cleaning and curation afterwards. So we're heading toward that direction. For the second part, once we have the corpus, we can annotate the database for which we're using text mining. The text mining and the annotation process is 3 parts. The first one is geospatial information, like the mountain ranges, the names of protected areas, the names of lakes, rivers. The second part is the taxonomic information. This is again the names of species that goes from orders to genus, genre, and then specific species names. And the third group is the thematic information. This is the topic we're interested in. It can be about interactions, it can be about climate change, or even evolution and others. So we use regular expressions to proceed with the text mining process that look like this, and each language has its own challenges. For example, Chinese have different roots for different words. So what we're trying to do is to gather a regular expression that can graph multiple words that have the same meaning of root. This is an example how the text mining goes. For the first, the orange part is the geospatial information. The blue is the species that we are looking for. The third part is the type of ecosystem. And the fourth one, that is the yellow, is the type of interaction of a topic that is of interest. Once we gather all of that information for each paper, we just build a very big database that looks like this. It's just a database that you can link with different traits or different information like GBIF and conservation status. And here's an example of the findings for birds. In Spanish and in English, we found information for over 700 bird species. Of course, English represents more species. You can see that the Andes are the best mountain range that has information about. And what we want to see is like the differences between the 2 different languages. And we've noticed that Spanish as a language mentions 84 different species that are not mentioned in English. So we were wondering like how many of those species were in danger or were critically in danger, and we found them. This is 4 of them. And in this case, I just want to mention the first bird that is called the Apollina's wren because it's endemic to Bogota savanna and is declining, but we only know information about them in Spanish. This is another example of how this data can be analyzed. Here we have African mammals where we can see in each box what is the most common reported species, but also the other species that are there. You can also notice like some biases, for example, in bigger mammals, primates, or charismatic species. Okay, I'll head over to Davnah. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So as Juliana said, we start with we end with an annotated database, and we hope to produce an assessment. Now, it's nice to have a database. We do our best to have a very clean database, which includes papers that are really relevant for the assessment chapter. But the fact is that there are many false positive or false negative. So there's still a step of validation that takes experts and interfaces such as Sysrev that allows kind of an online collaborative effort to validate publications. Once those publications have been validated, we push them onto Zenodo, and we've heard about that. We have within the BLR, the Biodiversity Literature Repository, we have a sub-community, which is the mountain biodiversity community, and there we put the papers that we decide to retain for our assessment. And then performing an assessment is nice, but what we also want to do with this work is to create the first of its kind mountain biodiversity knowledge graph. So basically, we want to be able to create a knowledge graph that anyone with a question about mountain biodiversity can query. And that's kind of a futuristic project for us who are not who are more biodiversity researchers than AI and so on researchers, but we are working on it. And so to get to that, there's a whole pipeline of steps to take. Zenodo was the first one. Then the papers go through Donut's pipeline and the treatment bank. And from there, they go into the biodiversity PMC. And what's nice there is that we combine the annotations. So we have a lot of annotations that are performed using mountain-specific vocabularies, which are not typically applied in other publications. And when the publications enter biodiversity PMC, there's a whole lot of other tagging that or metadata that are being added and that enrich the search. And then we work in collaboration with the Swiss Data Science Center, and those are a bunch of nerds who know what they do with large language models, with other AI tool. And the idea is to develop AI-based tools to not only look at the title and the abstract, which is what we are currently doing, but go through the entire paper and find the information that we want to put into our knowledge graph. And it's not only easy information like a species name or a geographic location, but it's also relationships, such that we can eventually know from the literature readily without asking experts to read the paper, whether there's an increasing trend in a species, a decreasing trend, or what is going on. That's where we are at right now. And I'm happy to take questions. Hey, we did it. 20 seconds left. Thank you.
Do I go forward? Yeah. Soon. Just let the anticipation build a little bit. Yeah, yeah, I can do that. I'm Britt Andermann, and I'm a research librarian with Uppsala University's Museum of Evolution, based in Uppsala, Sweden. Perhaps some of you know of the place because it has a famous connection to Linnaeus, so birthplace of taxonomy. Perhaps of interest to some individuals at this conference. Oh, but the wrong area. Good question. We can start answering some questions. Like tacos. I tasted arepas while here. Those were pretty delicious. Yeah. Oh boy, it's the oldest in Scandinavia. This is something that I should know. But it is very, yeah, have you been to the university? Yeah. Carolina Rediviva is, it's amazing, but it's very limited access to the the part of the library with the photographs that you see. So it's a little bit misleading because you think you get to just walk in there, but that they keep closed off.
So, do you have any more questions about Uppsala?
Oh, we got it now. Okay, all right. All right. So the introduction is over. So I'll just say that the focus of my talk is going to be on Natural History Museum archives and what a rich resource they are from which to mobilize biodiversity data, and an often overlooked and underutilized resource. So as I said, museum archives, they are really very unexamined often and very underutilized. And my focus is on unpublished documents. So among many things, you can have field notes, journals, catalogs, registers, donation inventories, course excursion records, and all of these documents are full of really valuable biodiversity data, which is just sitting hidden in an archive. And it's both taxonomic biodiversity data as well as what I'm going to highlight in the project I'll talk about is occurrence biodiversity data. So the Cullenberry excursion insect inventories, this is a project that I have been working on in collaboration with the Biodiversity Data Lab at Uppsala University. And what it is it's a really rich data set of insect occurrence data spanning nearly 50 years from 1948 to 1996. And the Biodiversity Data Lab's interest in working with this data set for their research is to look at insect trends over time. So you can see here that these are some of the different sampling sites where the inventories were carried out. They're all in the Uppsala region, but they were carried out very consistently and in a standardized manner over those 50 years. You can see an example of a page from the book where it's really the species list from the inventory that was carried out at that particular location with a date and other metadata that can accompany the sampling event. So the workflow for this project was taking the original document, scanning it so that we have the PDF, the digitized document, then running OCR, so we have the transcribed document. From there, we used AI, in this case, Google Copilot, to extract the species lists from the transcribed document. And then we developed a script in R in order to transform the species lists into occurrence data, which has also been annotated with the relevant metadata to the sampling events, so time and place information, as well as also in that step with the running the R script, using the taxonomic backbone in order to update the taxonomy and taxonomic names so that they are up to date. So from this data set alone, we estimate there are around 100,000 insect occurrences, which will have been extracted here. Oh, and importantly, I'm so sorry, I missed completely the fact to mention that once this has been transformed into occurrence data, it of course will be published to GBIF and made fair and open, which is what we all want. So, like I said, 100,000 occurrences. And I just want to emphasize that this is one data set sitting in one archive, in one institution, in one city, in one country. So if we zoom out, the amount of biodiversity data that there is sitting in archives in unpublished documents is really a huge amount of data that could be very valuable for research. So just to emphasize some of the key takeaways, that these archives at natural history museums are very rich resources. They require greater focus as they are often overlooked and underutilized. We need automated workflows in order to carry out this large-scale mobilization. And in doing so, this could really help to contribute to filling the temporal biodiversity data gaps that exist. And with that, thank you very much.
What do I like to eat? Fondue and raclette. Huh? Gracias. Okay, so now we have another flash talk, which is basically one of these use cases that Donat mentioned in the very introduction, also about extracting information from the digitized literature. And here we're focusing on mining arthropod organismal traits from the taxonomic treatments that are being digitized and made accessible through the Platzi workflow. So, you know, traditionally, when I'm up on stage, I'm talking about the sequence part of this kind of biodiversity knowledge graph. But today, I'm talking about the traits part of this biodiversity knowledge graph, which is, you know, the aim that we have as the long-term goal of feeding in all of these tiny little pieces coming from all of these different places to build this knowledge graph to be able to ask the questions and find the answers that we seek. Why arthropods? I guess most of you are familiar, but just the absolute incredible diversity, almost 1.4 million species, and of course already existing in the Platzi treatment bank, more than 700,000 digitized treatments. So that's why we decided to focus on arthropods, apart from the fact that my entire career up until that point has been the genomics of arthropods. So that's why I want to link the two. Overall, we have the documents. Very simply, we want to, in those documents, identify, first of all, the entities that represent named arthropod species. Then hopefully somewhere nearby, we want to identify the entities that represent some sort of biological trait, some sort of organismal trait. And if we're very lucky, then we also want to try to connect that to a value. So we have a species, we have its body length, and we have a number associated with that. Sounds simple? Yeah, okay. Find those three things, find the links between them, stick them in a database, and then see what the community thinks of it. It's a little bit more complicated behind the scenes of all the steps that have to go behind that, but we did publish that this year, so I encourage you to go and look at the publication, because in the 2-3 minutes that I have left, I'm not going to be able to go through each and every step of the workflow that we've put into place to begin to achieve this kind of annotation of these digitized documents. One way of looking at it in a very sort of high level is just the sort of word cloud of arthropods that we were able to get out of just 2,000 of those 700,000 taxonomic treatments. This is really a pilot study, if you like, to test feasibility. Hopefully we'll take it to the next level in a future project. And some of the traits. And the traits that we focused on were really feeding ecology, so who's eating who, basically, and there's a lot of that going on in the arthropod world. Habitat, so where are these creatures favoring to live, and then morphology, because of course the taxonomic treatments are super rich in descriptions of insect and other arthropod morphological features. Very, very briefly, what it looks like, we are able to get a number of arthropods out of each article, more apparent traits out of each article, and even more apparent values out of each article. And there you can kind of see, obviously, that the longer the article, the more arthropods, traits, and values we can extract out of them. And on the blue ones on the far right there, the connection between an arthropod and its trait, a lot fewer of those than the connection between a putative trait and its putative value. Obviously, we tried to do this as rigorously as possible. So using our curated sets as our benchmarking data sets to assess how well we are at correctly recognizing the entities, the arthropods, the traits, and their values. And you can see we're better at identifying arthropods than we are at identifying traits, than we are at identifying values. And that overall, it's challenging. I guess just looking at those statistics, it's still a work in progress. So why is it challenging? Because this is what it looks like, right? We have human written text, and we're asking it to identify 3 different types of elements, and then we're asking it to find the relationships between those elements. And so just by eye, these are the automatic annotations, okay? And you can see we have a species from trait, India, value. We have a species that feeds on, but it couldn't find what it feeds on, and all the way down to a species, or in this case, the genus is the closest named arthropod, feeding on pollen. But the last occurrence of the word pollen there, you see, wasn't even picked up as a value there. So it is possible, but it still needs further work. With the ultimate aim, of course, filling this knowledge graph with the species at the center of it about its organismal traits, and of course, specifically from my interest, also connecting that to the genomic information available for each species to build and feed the biodiversity knowledge graph. So I think we have a link there to the Disentis Roadmap. And again, this was just one of the use cases that is developed in this white paper that Donat mentioned at the beginning. Thank you very much.
Maria-Emilia
Hola, buenos días. Mi nombre es Nicky Nicolson y nuestra presentación trata sobre cómo mejoramos el acceso sobre la biodiversidad mediante la extracción automatizada de metadatos. Para comenzar, representemos al Observatorio Global del San Lorenzo. Estamos localizados en Canadá y somos un organismo sin fines de lucros creados en 2005. Trabajamos con más de 60 colaboradores, entre esos ONGs, universidades, ministerios, y nuestra misión principal es facilitar el acceso a datos abiertos de calidad y sobre los ecosistemas del San Lorenzo. El San Lorenzo es un sistema oceanográfico clave en Canadá y es conocido por su gran biodiversidad. También desde 2019 formamos parte de una de las 3 asociaciones regionales del CIUS, que es el Sistema Integrado de Observación de Océanos de Canadá. Y en esta sesión quisimos presentar una solución innovadora basada en la inteligencia artificial que permite extraer metadatos estructurados de la literatura gris. Pero hoy nos enfocaremos particularmente en cómo extraemos los metadatos de las variables oceánicas esenciales, mejor conocidas como EOVs. Como algunos lo sabrán, son un conjunto prioritario de variables que deben observarse y deben ser comparables a nivel internacional. Por lo tanto, estas variables fueron identificadas por el GUS y permiten que los datos puedan ser clasificados fácilmente en plataformas como OBIS y GBIF. En nuestro caso, esta es una de las maneras que clasificamos nuestros datos del San Lorenzo, favoreciendo cierta interoperabilidad entre estas plataformas. ¿Cómo funciona nuestro extractor de metadatos? Las etapas de la aplicación consisten en primero procesar un archivo de texto, luego el modelo de lenguaje es alimentado con un prompt que es específicamente diseñado para extraer las informaciones relevantes, como por ejemplo definiciones de los EOVs. Y después por último, el modelo produce un archivo que es estructurado JSON y que tiene todos los metadatos. En este caso sería una lista de EOVs. Esta es la interfaz de la aplicación. Como dijimos, se carga un archivo, por ejemplo, PDF, puede ser un reporte o un artículo científico, y luego el sistema devuelve una lista de EOVs. También indica un resumen de qué fue lo que analizó, y ese sería como la justificación. Y después también indica un nivel de confianza, que eso depende de qué tan cerca está el contenido de las definiciones. También se muestra lo que es una referencia de un texto, del texto que fue extraído para poder haber identificado esos EOVs. Y como último, el usuario puede validar o rechazar el EOV o los EOVs que fueron identificados. Se tiene que decir la razón por la cual se rechaza o se valida, y esto lo que hace es mejorar el modelo. Entonces, nuestra solución como conclusión acelera lo que es la generación de metadatos, aumenta la visibilidad de los juegos de datos, lo que los hace un poco más fair, y apoya a los investigadores y a los integradores de datos de biodiversidad. Muchas gracias.
Thanks, everyone. Is this okay? Cool. Okay. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to talk today. So I'm Nicky Nicolson. I'm a senior research software engineer in the biodiversity information team at Q. And what I'm going to show is some work that I've done with two colleagues. So Helen Hartley works in the International Plant Names Index team at Q. She spends the entirety of her working life, working with literature. So she's someone that you want to get on side. And Eve Lucas is a taxonomist in the accelerated taxonomy team at Q, works on Myrtaceae, is very excited that I'm in Colombia, keeps sending me fruit that I should go and buy. She's really interested in, well, how we're building this workflow with Helen and how we can later use it to get data on the descriptions of plants and the ID keys that people have published in literature in the past. And we've tried to build this in a kind of open and participatory way. So I'm going to focus mostly on that in this talk. Okay, so if you think about the work we do at Q, we've probably got two big inputs, and they are literature and specimens. I've got tons of colleagues here this week talking about our specimen digitization project. And literature and specimens do interlink because people talk about specimens in literature. But the project I want to mainly talk about is Q's longest running project that was set up by Darwin. And at the end of his life, he left a legacy with some rather ambitious project timings, 250 quid a year, maybe 4 or 5 years, make a perfect manuscript catalogue of all the plants we ever know. We're still doing that today. We changed names a few times, we changed technologies a few times, but yeah, we're still doing it. But if you look back at what we've done, we've got 130 years of how editors have inspected literature and how they've extracted data from that. So we've got a ton of process metadata that we can repurpose as training data with the technologies that we have today. And I'm not going to tell you that there have been social and technical advances in the past 130 years. I think that's pretty obvious. But even just in the time that, like, I've worked on this for a couple of decades, that's probably quite long in technology too. Even the team that do the IPNI work now, so they extract names out of literature, nomenclatural acts that have been published under the code. So they're pulling out names and type specimens, that kind of thing. In the time that that team have been working, we've seen literature be born digital and addressable through DOIs. So they don't need to have a trolley with a stack of paper journals on it anymore. They're working with PDFs. And we've got historical literature that's been digitized and available online. And I'd like to commend the work of the Biodiversity Heritage Library, which has really changed the way that team work. It's made them so much more efficient. But thinking a bit more widely than just data availability, then there's been a big move for us to socially manage shared resources. And that's a really positive view. If you think about where Darwin left his money, he left it to Q because Q was a big library. And with the availability of information online and the digitization of historic literature, you don't have to be in a capital city in London, in Britain, to do this kind of work because we can get at this data wherever you are. And of course, we have these huge advances in AI and machine learning to restructure data into standard formats. So yeah, I would kind of summarize all of those advances in terms of they've enabled the broadening of participation. So going from big institutions doing projects on their own and telling everyone how to be, to distributed teams of experts and many, many more people participating. And that kind of really fits with my interest as a software person working in biodiversity. I've been, over the past couple of years, associated with the Software Sustainability Institute in the UK. That's the world's first institute that has been set up to improve software in research activities. It's funded by the UK Digital Research Infrastructure Programme, and they run a fellowship programme. They do both kind of quite policy and campaigning activities, but they also do really practical training activities, and they provide some really great resources that help people produce better software and then ultimately produce better research at the end of it. So with that in mind, we have made our work with the bibliographic manager Zotero, which is both open source and managed in quite a sustainable way. So it's not particular to biodiversity. Tons of researchers and journalists use it. In fact, it was funded to support journalists. There's lots of training resources. It's got a really supportive community. I'm sure a lot of you use it anyway. So we've built our workflow around that. So I'm going to show you a few screenshots of how it actually works. So this is a journal article. A user's got it loaded in their browser, and up here you can see that they can save it into their local library. So they're clicking to save the data, the metadata about this article into their local library, but that can be synced and shared with a group of researchers too. When it grabs that, it also grabs a PDF as well as all the metadata about the journal article. This is what it looks like within that interface. So we've got a row of data that is about the article. We've got the full text attached to it. Over here, we've got all the bibliographic metadata, including the DOI and so on. And it's got a PDF viewer built into it. So if you think about what someone's doing when they're pulling out taxonomic treatments, here they can highlight that within a PDF, and you should be able to see up here. It knows what text has been highlighted. It knows who did it and when they did it. So we can pull that data out programmatically. Everything that I show you through this UI can also be done with an API. So they've marked up the region of text that they want to look at within this long article. And then we can make an export of that. So both the metadata that you see in that pane on the right-hand side and the piece of markup that has just been made. And that can be pulled into an annotations file, which is attached to the item in the library. Then you can export all that into a structured file. And that's what it looks like there. So you've got all the standard metadata that you might expect to see about a journal article, but then you've got the particular thing which is relevant to the research team that's done the markup. So we've got that as well. And what they do then is right now they're just dropping that into a large language model on the web as an attachment. And they're experimenting with what is the best prompt to get this data from this unstructured sentence into Darwin Core. Darwin Core for the type. So this is a citation of a botanical specimen. And this is the part that is the publication of the new species name. So we built it in a way that we can step through this incrementally rather than quickly say, right, we're going to do it all in an automated way. We're going to completely change the way we work. We're like slowly changing things and slowly letting people understand what is the best way that we can change them. So if you think about right now what our editors do, they decide where to look. So they do input selection. They decide what journals to look at. They decide where to look within those articles. And they structure that data by hand. What we've done with this experiment is we've continued to let them decide what to look at, continue to let them decide where to look, but the LLM is doing the formatting. So it's taking that unstructured data and it's turning it into a data standard. We've just started now testing automated region detection because everything that they've done here has built training data sets which make us more able to do these more automated parts at the bottom. So we're doing region detection. We're writing that data in using the API, and then they're checking it. So slowly, we're more automating the things that they do. The final thing we'll do is look at making automated feeds in so that they're not working out what to look at, but we're kind of proposing what to look at, automate the region detection, and then we'll program the way that we communicate with the LLM when they have decided what is the best kind of prompt to use. So to conclude then, we've built this project with a strong sustainability focus because we really want to be able to reuse the process that we've done and build a community around it. And I think really key on to that is that we're advancing incrementally. Like we're exploring how to do it, and we're learning from each other all the time as we do this. And I'd like to highlight, if I can, a couple of other relevant parts of the program. So tomorrow there's a group session from the Digital Extended Specimen Group. And I think the extraction of this data from literature is something that is absolutely key to building the Digital Extended Specimen. And we've got an unconference session on Friday morning. So if there are any kind of areas that you want to follow up a little more on or discuss, then there's a board at the Tadwig booth. And you can make a pitch on Friday morning. And if you're lucky enough to be selected, then you can discuss it and report back. Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you. I have had such a terrible time with these things, so anything could happen. Right, let's go. Okay, so I want to give a sort of very opinionated, arm-wavy assessment of where we are in terms of the literature. And I'm going to talk about these 5 things. Finding taxonomic papers or biodiversity literature in general is really hard. We have a problem that a lot of that literature disappears, whole journals in Spanish, taking species descriptions with them. There's been a lot of discussion in this community about the evils of PDFs. For many articles that we care about, we still do not have persistent identifiers. And in general, there's often a lack of access to this kind of literature. So what I want to do is sort of race through some of these things. So the first question is findability, just simply finding stuff. And it seems mind-boggling this is still hard. I mean, we have lots of literature search engines. We have PubMed, we have PMC, we have OpenAlex, we have Wikidata, Google Scholar, and also we have domain sort of narrow sort of focus search engines like ReFindIt and the Biodiversity Literature Repository. And still, we cannot find stuff. And I think there's several reasons for this. One is that taxonomy it's not uniquely like this, but we have long data. There's an enormous long tail. This is an analysis of which journals published new animal names over the last couple of centuries. So our field today is dominated by Zootaxa, a huge journal. Zookeys is number 2. And then there's a long tail of small journals. Many of these are run by little societies or individuals, amateurs. In many cases, these things are stuck on WordPress sites or individual little blog posts, and many of them are closed. So a huge amount of our basic fundamental knowledge about biodiversity is really hard to find. The second thing is, even if you manage to find it, it might not stay around for very long. So in the last couple of years, we've encountered all sorts of things. This is 2 examples of journals that have just gone. On the left, this is a journal, nice little taxonomic journal, had its own website, and it's gone. It's now just a part domain website. The one on the right, this is a journal where the editor was a taxonomist, and he basically said, fuck my life, nobody likes taxonomy, I quit and walked away. Now, he didn't manage the domain, so somebody came along and took that and made it a whole new journal and published things that have nothing to do with butterflies and was making money. The one on the left, we managed to rescue. It's in Wayback Machine. The one on the right is also in Wayback Machine, and also is now in BHL. This is a regular occurrence. These things just vanish. So these are potentially descriptions of new species that have gone. Now, there are some attempts to kind of do something about this. This is one little example. This is me basically going around the internet and grabbing PDFs before they vanish. And I stick them in Internet Archive. And I've got about, what, 162,000 of these. Now, it's bonkers that one person is sort of doing this. I mean, this is just obviously a tiny fraction of the stuff that's potentially out there. So a huge amount of stuff can just vanish. Next up, we love talking about PDFs, and we love slagging PDFs off, and I've done that, and done that a lot. I think one of the most interesting papers I've ever read about the PDF is this one here. I won't try and mangle the French, but basically there was this idea that the problem with the PDF is it takes essentially, if you like, a cow, converts it into a hamburger, and we then want to go back from the hamburger to the cow, and we can't do that. So the issue is we take all this kind of structured information, stick it into PDF, we lose stuff. But PDFs, you know, we all use them. They're not going away. They're still the fundamental thing that we use to exchange information. And also, I think arguably getting information out of PDFs is more or less a solved problem. If you look at all the AI tools that have come out, there now seems to be a trend. You take a PDF, you get structured markdown, the job is done. Now, I exaggerate slightly, but I think we should just, PDFs are here, let's not worry about them too much. I think the real goal is to save them before they vanish, and then convert them to something that we can use. The next hobby horse, lack of persistent identifiers. I think this is a classic problem that we have, and I call it the Gary Larson problem. So the real message about persistent identifiers, and particularly DOIs, is you should get a DOI. That DOI should be machine resolvable. You should be able to find what that DOI is referring to. These DOIs should be interlinked. And if things go horribly wrong, there should be a person you can talk to fix it. That's a very long-winded message. So what people hear is get a DOI, and they stop thinking. And the name comes from this famous Gary Larson cartoon where somebody's telling off a dog, very bad dog, keep out of the garbage, Ginger, you're very, very bad. And all the dog hears is blah, 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 Ginger, blah, blah, blah. And I think people hear blah, 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 DOI, blah, blah, blah. Therefore, they think the problem is, I need a DOI. And can I get the cheapest DOI possible, please? Now, not all DOIs are equal or equally good. So in terms of the academic world, by far and away, the most important, most widely used DOI comes from Crossref. There are other DOIs out there. There are quite a few national agencies in Taiwan and Japan and China. And also there's places like DataCite. Now, Crossref DOIs cost money. Many DataCite ones do not. So it's enormously tempting to use them. But they are nothing like as good as Crossref. You stick a DataCite DOI in a paper, you're effectively still sticking it in a silo. And we sort of missed the whole message that we don't want just a DOI, we want the ecosystem that goes with it. Now, let's give you an example. If you've got some DOIs, you can do some nice things. You can get some metrics, and maybe BHL can box somebody around the ears and get some money and saying, we've got some measurable impact here. This is a project that Nicole Kiley is here, was leading. This is basically putting DOIs on articles within BHL, articles that we'd found. And it started about 2020. We extracted something like 50,000 articles of DOIs. These are new DOIs that we minted. They've been cited about 74,000 times. So if BHL was an academic, their H-index would be 79, which I think is eminently employable. And also we can do things with DOIs as well. There's probably come across the Unpaywall project. It takes a DOI and tells you, is there a nice legally available copy of the article available? You don't have to do Sci-Hub. And BHL basically says there's about 48,000 of these that we can give you, but the publisher says you have to pay. Which of course, are we going to lose BHL? Which just emphasizes the whole problem that sustainability in this whole field is kind of difficult. If you ask people about BHL, everybody says they love it, and nobody's got any money for it. This is probably a fairly familiar kind of theme. I'm a huge supporter of BHL. I do a lot of work with them. I think there are a couple of things we could improve. And just one example, BHL now has a huge amount of content from Pensoft. I love Pensoft, but what the hell is BHL doing archiving a journal that's never going away? Pensoft is open access, it's archived everywhere. There are journals that are literally disappearing right now. That's what we should be focusing on, the stuff that's going to go away, not the stuff that is safe. And there's also issues with getting BHL content from these nice scans into something that's machine readable. So I think BHL is obviously being slightly challenged at the moment, but I think this is a huge opportunity to start sort of thinking about other things we can do with BHL. Okay, so what do we do? So this is just 5 kind of suggestions. The first is to resurrect something called Siteback. This was a BHL project from decades ago. The basic idea is, why don't we just get the entire taxonomic literature in terms of just citation strings, the kind of things we see in the wikis, the kind of things that are literature cited, stick them in one place. So we have essentially the entire universe of citations in our field. If you go to something like OpenAlex is wonderful. Open access sucks for a lot of the legacy literature. It just doesn't have it. So we can make that. It's going to be messy. It's going to be full of duplicates. That's okay. We can sort that out. In terms of nice, clean, robust data, Wikidata seems to be the obvious place to send that. You've got a whole community of people only too eager to point out the errors and fix it. I think we need to actively store the PDFs that are out there for the taxonomic literature. I do not understand why the taxonomic nomenclature committees that control names do not do this. I mean, they care about the rules for the names. They don't care about the evidence or saving the evidence that those names point to something. BHL could expand its vision, the kind of things it does. I think there's huge scope for providing support for small publishers in the taxonomic community. Many of these are basically, as I said, amateurs doing their level best to do something. They would love a little platform that would give them some support. And I think BHL has a possibility there. And lastly, if we want to provide simple computer readable content, it seems to be that Markdown is going to be the way to go. All the major AI tools seem to be PDF, Markdown, and then the fun begins. Thanks very much for your time. Okay, so we would like to start with some questions to the presentation. If there are there any questions in the room regarding any of the presentations? Okay, so there is one question from Siobhan. Questions for Laurence Bénichou. You mentioned the list of citations cited by an article. Right. Okay. You mentioned the list of citations cited by an article, but do you also add to that citations list the data set cited by the article? I'm thinking for DOI examples for such as those minted by GBIF for downloads of occurrence data.
The short answer should be yes. And the more difficult one is I have to check because it's under GBIF. So it's GBIF doing so. So it's the citation within GBIF linking the citation of the paper under the hosted portal. So the hosted portal just have the display of the data, but the data are made by GBIF. But the quick answer would be yes.
And another question from COPAM is to Britt. Could you go into more detail about how you updated the historic taxonomic names?
Yeah, so there's an R package that you can use that then it allows you to access the GBIF's library and their taxonomic backbone. And then you can write that into your script, into the R script, and it automatically then goes through the species names and it updates those taxonomic names. It identifies them and updates them to the currently accepted taxonomic name.
I would like to make a comment on Rod's talk. Rod, I fully see your point. Pensalt is everywhere. Yes, it's archived well. But the vision of BHL, in my understanding, should be not just to take Pensalt, but to take all biodiversity journals, including those which are open access, includes those which are vanished already. So that's it should be really the resource to go when you look for biodiversity articles, and not just to look for small publishers or publishers which are, let's say, hardly accessible. I think BHO should become the primary resource for biodiversity data because it has the chance to put in one place the huge historical legacy, which it has, and the new things which are published. And if you have them together, it's much easier to work with the literature. That's my understanding.
And I totally agree. So EGT is doing the same that Pensoft. So EGT is now through BHL. For us, BHL has the role of any library. So dissemination is part of their mission. So it's quite normal from my point of view that every journal finds its way. But I do understand your concern about resource and probably maybe, but it's not like saving the journal for us, but it's more like dissemination, and that we found one way everywhere.
Yeah, it's a perfectly reasonable response. And I guess the only thing I would say is I think it's a question of priorities. And given BHL has demonstrably limited resources, is this the best thing to do when we face, like, for example, journals that are literally vanishing before our eyes? So in an ideal world, yes, let's have it all. Excellent. But I think it's a question of priorities.
That's up to BHL, not us.
Yeah, just on that, maybe we need to apply conservation priorities to literature resources.
I'm on both sides. So I'm Nicole Carney. I manage the Biodiversity Heritage Library project in Australia. BHL Australia actively seeks out small publishers and puts their content online. We get copyright agreements with those organisations. So this week we uploaded the Journal of Limnology of Australia, which was a small publication. Until this week, it was available nowhere else online. And we do this regularly. Last year we ran a field naturalist project where we uploaded the publications of the little field naturalist clubs that have all these really long histories of surveying in a particular area. So, and they were not available anywhere else online. So that is really, really important work that BHL does. But I agree that it's also important to have the recent publications online. Pensoft is now one of the largest publishers that is putting content into BHL. They're out competing us in BHL Australia, so grr. But equally, that's very fast, and there's a really quick process for doing that. So it's low-hanging fruit. Sure, we get the content in BHL, we have taxonomic name recognition and all the other amazing things that BHL has. Takes more work, more time to get those small publishers in, but it's extraordinarily valuable. So I'm just going to sit on the fence here. I agree with both of you. Let's put everything into BHL. And yeah, let's save BHL. And thank you for emphasising how important that is, Rod.
Yeah, I had a comment on Nicky's and Rod's talks. A lot of the responsibility for this mess comes to the international codes of nomenclature. And again, last year, registration of names was rejected by almost 50% of the people there. The way the votes are worked on those things is basically if you show up, you can vote. And if we leave it to the nomenclaturists to police the nomenclaturists, this will continue to happen. And it was really, maybe not politically correct to say, but it was the Americans who basically swung it in the way of not having any registration because of sort of very libertarian views on what should be done. So we really need the people who need standardization in this thing and have rules about where you can publish data and how you register names to go along to those events and vote for what's needed. And unfortunately, that's not happening yet, but the next meeting of the International Association of Plant Taxonomy will be in South Africa, I think in 2027. So be there and vote for what you want.
just to change the subject, Nicky, you're using AI to get the specimens, past the specimen codes in the literature. How portable do you think those prompts are? I mean, would it be that I would need the same AI LLM that you're using, or could you, for example, publish these prompts and I could use them with a different AI setup?
I think we could probably share them, and that's something as a community we could do a lot better with. And also, because you can use the talker previous to me had a really nice slide with the prompt and the schema and the output. We could share the way that we express those schemas in extraction type prompts. So the standard schemas that we have in our community, how you express those in extraction type prompts. Because yeah, that can sometimes can be a little bit tricky to set up, but we shouldn't all be doing that ourselves.
Yeah, Christoph Heuser, Berlin Museum of Natural History and Cheapish, Germany. First, let me thank you, Laurence and Donat, for bringing this really interesting session together. I have a rather suggestion, but perhaps also a question, particular to Britt, but maybe also to Nicky. Having had the, privilege to serve for the last 10, 15 years at the management level of one of the larger European natural history institutions, you don't need to convince me that we have failed to untap in this huge treasure trove of archives that we also have in addition to our collections. And in many ways, of course, we have seen, or we have had some success in mobilizing funds to digitizing collections, but digitizing archive material is much less done, visible, talked about. So in order to change that, my question or suggestion is, again, you're aware, certainly in Europe, we are quite well networked. We have, for the natural history collection, museums, institutions, we have had for more than 20, 30 years, good connectivity. We have had, or we have important funding projects for this community. And there are also regular exchanges between the leadership, even between North American and European institutions. And without stepping on anybody's toes, again, we have really failed to pick that up. So have you considered, or would it be feasible, and maybe you have tried and they have, because usually these directors just talk about how important their institutions are, but less about the concrete things. Don't cite me for saying that, but I was one of them. But question or suggestion is, have you considered approaching the European case CTAF or DISCO to make that a concerted effort? You have a wonderful pilot case, which gives visibility to Uppsala or to your institution. And again, Q and a few others have done similar things. So why not try to put this to a higher visibility at European or regional level? I can't talk so much about the Americas, but I know you have similar communities. So question is, have you tried? And if not, I would really suggest you should give it a try, and happy to support you behind the scenes for Europe at least. Thanks.
Yeah, so thank you for your comment and for your question. That's something that I am actively working to do. So, for example, you mentioned DISCO, and right now they have this registration for the digital specimens. There's an open call right now, and so in this case, I didn't mention in the presentation, but actually this archival data, it's also connected very heavily then to the specimens that are in our entomological collection. So we have both the collection and we have the archival data. And at the moment, I'm a little bit of the roadblock in a way is that I think there is a lack of understanding, at least at my institution, what DISCO really the value, I think there's a lack of kind of understanding of making sense of the real benefit that is there. And so that's something that I'm pushing for, and really hope to get this project into Disco, because I think that it would be really important in trying to bring more visibility to this, because I feel like I can't be, and I know I'm not the first person to have this realization that this is an absolute treasure trove, but it has been a little confounding in a way that it is such a treasure trove of biodiversity data, and yet, like, the focus at natural history museums goes to the collections solitarily, but the archives just sit there, and this is just one small slice of the value that the archives have. You could talk for at length about the benefits that they have, also connected directly to the collections. So I would really appreciate, maybe we can talk more about any collaboration, support. Yeah, I'm of course more than receptive.
Hello, Patricia Marian. I'm working also for the Royal Museum for Central Africa in Belgium. And actually, we experienced that we managed to mobilize funding for archives if they are about the colonial past. And also if next generation want to learn about their families, because there are information in there. But there are also many information about how the objects and the specimens came to the country. So I always tried that they also look a bit at that information and that it's important. And I'm happy to say that we got recently funding from the Commission, where they actually came to us, the DG International, to archive all our geological collections. So there I immediately contacted them that they should look to extract the data and that we have the community. But for the life science, for the moment, we didn't manage to convince them. And earth science is, of course, because there are a lot of economical challenge behind and information where minerals or precious things are still around in Africa. So I hope that will not have an impact on the environment there when this will be disclosed. But they told me they cannot put it completely in open data because it's far too dangerous that illegal mining is going to happen if they put that online. So it's not that easy to disclose it at open data if you talk about such archives, even if they are interesting for science.
I would bring in a little bit the Disentis Roadmap perspective on the repositories. So deliberately in the Disentis Roadmap, we talk about use cases. So a scientist has a project, or IPBES does a review, or you want to do global mountain biodiversity assessment. And for that, you collect all the publications you want. So you build a corpus of PDFs. And so a strategy can be that you actually start to build up this nucleus of publications which cover one topic and make it bigger and bigger. So that's an island, and there is an island. And for that, it's not a journal, a publication aspect, but it's really making sure we have all the publication about the topic. And that's one of the vision of the biodiversity literature repository, that you build communities of scientists who have projects who make all their publications accessible. And we've seen in many cases that the publications, especially the last 60 years publications, there are on the desk of scientists. So for example, we have Texodras, that's the database that includes all the Drosophilid literature. It's about 19,000 publications, which have been carefully curated by a taxonomist who has all the literature. So when you make this all accessible, then we have all this literature, which is complementing what we have in BHL, and it can be linked, and we can actually create like a nomenclatorial database, which all are completely linked through publications. And there are a lot of groups who started in the 2000s to collect all the PDFs. So that's another aspect of actually building up the knowledge graph, because you have complete corpora of literature. we're getting to the end. So are there any comments about the Disentis Roadmap?
So thank you. I'm Regina Wetzer at the Natural History Museum in Los Angeles. So you're just addressing exactly the point we have is when you have these large corpuses that have been accumulated of PDFs that would not be in BHL and they're still under copyright. Where does one put those as you have researchers that are retiring and those collections that are very well curated and databased, where can they possibly go?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the approach from the biodiversity literature repository that you enable this. So, but there again, it's about corpora, which are research corpora. You keep closed what's closed, but the scientist has access to that. They can cite this. But more importantly, we can start to mine this publication and take data out. So we can take all the descriptions, the figures out and make them accessible. So the publication stays closed. And in the ideal way, we could also go and extract all the material citations and create Darwin Core archives and send them to GBIF. So from GBIF, then you can go back and look at the material citation, the treatment, to the figures. And if you have access, you can also have access to the publication.
Nicole Carney from Biodiversity Heritage Library again. I can expand a little bit on that. I think if I understood your question correctly, a lot of the in-copyright publishers that we arrange access agreements with who've given us permission to put their content online do allow us to have embargo periods. There's kind of a diminishing return of if you've got your content behind a paywall, you do make some money out of your archive content, but not much. So a lot of our publishers will arrange an embargo period. So they might, because they make money out of their recent issues, they might have 1 year, or sometimes 10 years of an embargo period and allow us to upload their content up to that year. And then that moving wall moves every year. Most of my January is taken up working with what becomes available. The same with material moving out of copyright. BHL rapidly uploads all the content that comes out of copyright every year in January. Did that answer your question?
Yes, it answers a little bit. But again, when you have taxonomic and when you're looking at specimens, you have type collections to which you have type literature. That is the literature that's then bound. Yes, if you have access to worms and you have a worms editor, you can get to that journal. But again, you have collections where individuals are sitting on that PDF ready to go and or OCR'd, but not pulled apart into separate data structures. So again, as people retire and leave and institutional directions change, and that is no longer priority, those things just vastly disappear. And so that is my concern of like, where can one go to pull that out? And again, these are journals that are really old and are the little ones that we were talking about, the esoteric ones that no longer exist.
Quick. Just a kind of out there statement, anyone who has journals that they know about that, let us know. We will do everything we can to contact those publishers and let them know that we can save their content, rescue it, put it online. We do that a lot. So we do take requests.
Sorry, the person who just asked the question from LA, I didn't catch your name. All right, hello. I think that perhaps it is the valuable thing about the collections that you describe isn't so much obviously one by one they're important, but it's the collection of them. So one wouldn't want to lose that. If you uploaded them to BHL, you want to know that this was the research collection for the person that worked on this taxonomic group. Is that correct? Yes, yeah. Because then, even if you were not able to break them apart in the way that Plazi does, at least you would know to look there if that was your group that you're interested in.
Okay, with that, we are coming to an end of this.
You are talking about taxon-based collections of papers. After retirement, they go somewhere and it's really lost treasure. Donald mentioned that there is a biodiversity literature repository based in Zenodo. and they have this system to upload collections around the topic, around the taxon. And once they are there as PDF, they can be further processed, they can be used by anyone, and you can upload them, even they are copyrighted, you upload the metadata and the link to the original source. But they are there. So that's the place to go, I think.
I'd just like to add one additional comment for material that is in copyright that you and your institution do have access to. On the Hugging Face repositories right now, there are a number of small models for GLAM that are being made accessible over the past couple of weeks or so. So there are freely available, well-documented, well-described open source models that are specifically made for these types of workflows. So named entity recognition and NoCR HTR using those models are extremely efficient. And because of the ability to work around copyright limitations, all of these models can be run on local hardware. You don't even need a cluster or all sorts of advanced computing infrastructure. So there are options for processing things. And if the publisher no longer exists and you can't get a waiver of copyright or text and data mining rights, options do exist.
Okay, with that vote, I think we're going to close. And it's also a vote for diversity. So there's not one solution that solves everything, but we need probably a lot of different ways to preserve our heritage for now. For those interested to participate in this Disentis Roadmap approach, we'll meet here at 6 o'clock. Those who want to sign, go to disentisroadmap.org. And everybody who gets this fantastic badge to be part of this 10 years interesting challenge. And with that, I would thank everybody for the interesting discussions and contributions.
Well,